Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Mark Martin. Coming up, new developments with former Governor Andrew Cuomo's sexual harassment case. We will have the details. And MODERNA's CEO gives his thoughts on the new COVID variant Omicron. Plus, the crisis surrounding vaccine mandates when it comes to jobs and why one expert says it's time for Americans to stand up for their rights.
As a society, we don't want to have a two-tier system where we have documented vaccinated individuals and undocumented unvaccinated individuals who are unable to participate in society to the same degree as others.
And the next challenge for Kyle Rittenhouse when it comes to his university and his peers. The leader of Every Black Life Matters weighs in.
A lot of these students are just willfully ignorant on this. It was clearly self-defense.
Then, see how country music singer Leanne Rimes is digging deeper with her new album, God's Work, offering hope to bring people together in times where we seem divided. All these stories and more are next.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
We start with new developments in the sexual harassment case involving former Governor Andrew Cuomo. The state's attorney general has released evidence from her office's investigation, including video testimony from Cuomo and several of his accusers. CBN's Jenna Browder has our top story.
For the first time, we're hearing the testimony of former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, which stands in stark contrast to the testimony of his accusers. And it also appears his brother, CNN anchor Chris Cuomo, played a bigger role in advising the former governor than thought.
Have you ever had an inappropriate relationships with women on your staff?
Inappropriate, I assume, means a sexual relationship with women on my staff? The answer is no.
The New York Attorney General releasing 9 hours of video testimony taken this summer as part of an investigation which found Cuomo sexually harassed 11 women and eventually led to his resignation. The Attorney General also releasing testimony of 6 of his accusers, including Brittany Commisso.
And so you have hugged Ms. Commisso?
I have hugged her, and she has initiated many of the hugs.
But that's not what Commisso claims. She says those hugs made her uncomfortable.
I remember his hand just sliding right up my blouse. And I remember looking down, and I remember seeing his hand, which is, I would say, it's a large hand, and over my bra.
The Attorney General's report says they found Cuomo's, quote, denials to lack credibility and to be inconsistent with the weight of the evidence obtained during our investigation. Cuomo is now charged with misdemeanor forcible touching, coming from that alleged incident with Commisso.
Look, I keep telling this to you, and it has never mattered more.
Meanwhile, CNN released a statement that it will review records that show anchor Chris Cuomo advised the former governor's aides on responding to the allegations and passed on information about upcoming stories on the scandal. Those records, quote, deserve thorough review and consideration, the statement reads. Meanwhile, Andrew Cuomo continues to maintain his innocence. His attorney says the evidence released was manipulated with selective editing and redactions. Jenna Browder, CBN News.
In other news, the chief executive officer of Moderna says existing COVID-19 vaccines are likely less effective against the Omicron variant. Stefan Bancel telling the Financial Times, I think it's going to be a material drop. I just don't know how much because we need to wait for the data. President Biden is urging Americans to take precautions but not to panic over the new variant. Monday, he encouraged all adults and eligible children to get vaccines and booster shots.
If people are vaccinated and wear their masks, there's no need for the lockdown. This variant is a cause for concern, not a cause for panic.
Omicron is thought to be more transmissible, but so far doctors are reporting mild symptoms among patients. There are about 200 confirmed cases worldwide, but none found in the U.S. yet. This new variant comes as the White House has dealt a major blow on its vaccine mandate. A federal judge halted the president's vaccine requirement for healthcare workers in 10 states. The rule applies to hospitals that receive federal funding. This injunction by a Missouri-based federal court putting the vaccine mandate on hold in the 10 states that sued the Biden administration. The district judge, a Trump appointee, writing, "The scale falls clearly in favor of healthcare facilities." And we will have more coverage on the vaccine mandates coming up later in the broadcast. The Supreme Court will hear oral arguments Wednesday in an abortion case that has far-reaching implications. Some see it as the legal linchpin that could overturn Roe v. Wade, the 1973 decision that legalized abortion in the United States. So will the Supreme Court overturn Roe v. Wade? CBN News will have live coverage ahead of the Supreme Court decision and see our special report beginning at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on our CBN News YouTube channel. The Fairfax County School District is reinstating 2 controversial books in their high schools. Lawn Boy and Genderqueer, a Memoir, are the 2 books in question. One parent voiced her concern, saying the book contains porn with its graphic descriptions between men and boys.
I decided to check the titles at my child's school, Fairfax High School. The books were available, and we checked them out. Both of these books include pedophilia, sex between men and boys.
The committees unanimously recommended the books remain. A school member also suggested that teenagers' access to the book is okay as they are only available for high school students. A Northern Virginia teacher who battled his school board over transgender policy says he learned to trust God more. Tanner Cross is speaking out after the Loudoun County School Board agrees in a court settlement to reinstate him. CBN's Tara Mergener spoke with him and has the latest.
Tanner tells me this is a major triumph, not just for him, but for educators and people of faith who want to take a stand.
Loudoun County Public Schools can no longer punish me for my speech that I made back in May. And that should tell teachers in our community and maybe in the country that, hey, you know, if you want to go advocate for your students at a school board meeting and you think that harmful ideologies maybe coming in through your school board or being implemented into your lessons to, you know, go voice your opinion.
In the spring, the Loudoun County School Board tried to silence Cross after he told members he would not refer to students by their preferred pronouns.
I'm a teacher, but I serve God first, and I will not affirm that a biological boy can be a girl and vice versa, because it's against my religion, it's lying to a child, it's abuse to a child, and it's sinning against our God.
Those words got Cross suspended, while school officials argue Policy 8040 was introduced to create more equity for transgender students. Cross insists it violates his Christian faith and his First Amendment rights.
My faith made me go to that school board meeting.
As part of a settlement reached in November, Tanner will keep his job, have the suspension removed from his record, and receive $20,000 from the county to help pay his legal fees. Alliance Defending Freedom, which represented Tanner in the case, is pleased with the outcome.
What I think this case shows is that the Constitution doesn't have some carve-out for certain ideologies or some carve-out for certain viewpoints that people don't like. No, this covers everything.
Meanwhile, Cross says the ordeal has brought him closer to God.
I learned to trust God more. So my faith grew, and it's just growing more and more as we go. And God's he's granting us with what we believe, he's granted us victories because of our obedience to him.
And the court battle isn't over yet. ADF, along with Cross and 2 other Loudoun County teachers, are still suing over Policy 8040, which also allows transgender students to use bathrooms that match their gender identity. In Washington, I'm Tara Mergener, CBN News.
Up why some businesses are going ahead with vaccine mandates and why Americans need to stand up for their freedom and their jobs. An expert has that opinion coming up. One of the ongoing fallouts from the pandemic is the impact on the American economy, jobs, and workforce. The vaccine mandate is making for challenges with hiring in many careers. And Rachel Morrison, policy analyst with the Ethics and Public Policy Center, joins us now with a look at the scope of the issue. Welcome, Rachel.
Thanks for having me. Even
though OSHA halted implementing the mandate due to pending lawsuits, it's already done quite a bit of harm to the job market. What is most concerning to you?
Well, I think it's concerning that we're trying to punish, coerce, and shame individuals into taking a medical intervention for non-medical reasons, that they need to take the vaccine, not because the vaccine is the best medical decision for them, but in order to keep their job or to put food on the table or to go to the store, or go to a restaurant, or go see a movie with their friends.
There's concern here, of course, with government overreach. If this stands, what could it mean for freedoms that we've often taken for granted in America?
Well, first off, we're hopeful that this will not stand because, as you mentioned, it is government overreach. OSHA does not have the authority to issue a nationwide vaccine mandate. But it's concerning that the federal government is trying to do such a thing. And if it does stand, it's just going to set a precedent for more overreach in the future.
What do you expect to happen with the lawsuits?
Well, right now, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals was the court that won the lottery to hear all of these cases challenging the vaccine mandate. And so the court is going to receive briefing from the government and from the parties. There'll be an oral argument. And regardless of the outcome, I expect that it's going to be appealed by the losing party and go to the Supreme Court. And ultimately, the Supreme Court's going to have to step in and decide this issue.
What kind of immediate impact is this having on the daily lives of the average American?
Well, I think there's a lot of uncertainty caused by this. Employers don't know whether they have to require vaccines or whether they have to require testing or masking or what it is. So it's creating a lot of uncertainty within the job market. Many employers are moving forward regardless of whether they're legally required to have a vaccine mandate and imposing their own vaccine mandate because of the thought that they will have to eventually. This is kicking individuals out of the workforce. We're already seeing record unemployment. We're seeing supply chain crisis, and yet we're trying to get more people out of the workforce because they're not vaccinated.
And then what about long term? Can you talk big picture here?
Well, I think right now is the time for everyone to stand up and to tell the government that this is not something that they should require, that as a society, we don't want to have two-tier system where we have documented vaccinated individuals and undocumented unvaccinated individuals who are unable to participate in society to the same degree as others. There's ways where if there's safety concerns, we can alleviate those concerns by other methods, as we have been doing for almost 2 years now since the pandemic started. But the government mandating vaccines for everyone, regardless of the individual's own medical history and their own individual risks and benefits as it comes to COVID and the vaccine, is inappropriate.
Rachel, I want to go back to what you mentioned about employers implementing their own mandates. Why are they doing this, and what is your concern with that?
Well, first off, employers are free legally to implement their own vaccine mandates with or without government encouragement. And so we want a society where employers are free to have the requirements they'd like for their businesses. But that being said, any mandate is subject to various federal civil rights protections, such as the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Both of these statutes require reasonable accommodations that do not pose undue hardship on the employer for disability and religion, respectively. And so employers have to take into consideration those who have certain medical objections to taking the vaccine and religious objections, and they need to provide them reasonable accommodations if they're able to do so without an undue hardship. And on top of that, we'd like to encourage employers to respect conscience more broadly beyond what is required in the law, and to not coerce their employees to take the vaccine when they have strong objections to it based on conscience, but maybe not based on a disability or religious belief.
And then along those lines, why do you think this is being allowed when prior to the pandemic we had an expectation of privacy with our health and medical information? Is that not the case now?
Well, I think there's some gaps in the medical and health information laws. They apply to certain types of industries and employers, but not all employers. It applies to certain types of information. And so this might be an area where we can have some reform in the law and fill in some of those gaps so that this medical information is protected more broadly across the board.
Okay, Rachel Morrison with the Ethics and Public Policy Center. Thanks for your insights, Rachel.
Thanks for having me.
Leftist students at Arizona State University are demanding that the, quote, murderer Kyle Rittenhouse be withdrawn from the school. Students for Socialism, Students for Justice in Palestine, and 2 other student groups are demanding that administrators take action against Rittenhouse. A jury recently found the 18-year-old ASU student not guilty of murdering 2 rioters last year in Kenosha, Wisconsin. The president of Every Black Life Matters says the legitimacy of the verdict makes it hard to consider Rittenhouse to be a murderer.
It makes me believe that these students actually did not pay attention to the case, that they actually did not, understand what, the nuances of the case. Basically, it sounds like they actually just took a look at what was said before the case, all of the media narratives, and then the outcome. And then they're driving their own conclusions based on that. But they didn't actually follow the facts of the case. I mean, it was clearly self-defense.
Kevin, in your opinion, why did all this become a racial issue when those 2 men that were killed by Rittenhouse were actually white, the same color as Rittenhouse? So how did that happen?
Several media entities continue to carry the narrative that Rittenhouse actually shot black men. Even up until last week, there was a couple of media publications that were saying that Rittenhouse shot black men. I mean, it's unbelievable the media malpractice and the media deceptions that were going on with this. And I'm assuming that a lot of these students are just willfully ignorant on this and purposely did not get involved in the nuances of the case and are willfully being ignorant so they can drive their radical narrative on this whole thing.
So how does the teaching of critical race theory then play into all of this? What impact do you think that's having on young blacks and young impressionable white high school and college-age students?
CRT paints this narrative of white privilege, white supremacy, and you're hateful irrespective of that. Now, for us, people of faith, we know that this is completely antithetical to our faith foundations because Jesus came to redeem all. There is no such thing as irredeemable. So people of faith should not fall into the CRT crowd at all. Because Jesus came to redeem all people, and so for people of faith, this is a non-starter. But nevertheless, it is having a profound impact on our society and culture. But the fact is that when you have CRT driving this narrative, any of these potential inflections that are happening within culture and society, and this Rittenhouse case is a perfect example, they will take any potential narrative and drive sort of this racial wedge, this divisiveness, and try to make it seem like there's a supremacy narrative here, even though all of the people involved were white. Everybody was white here in this particular incident. And so believe it or not, at the end of the day, Black Lives Matter is actually trying to protect the namesake of a felonious child predator and, domestic abuser who lost their lives by way of trying to take the life of Rittenhouse. So it was, again, Rittenhouse was acquitted on self-defense grounds, rightly so. But BLM is aligning with these guys and their families, trying to say that Rittenhouse was a supremacist, a militia, and of course an oppressor, and should not be protected. So this is where CRT comes down, right? Anybody white, anybody who is even protecting themselves legitimately is somehow having privilege, and this is regrettably this is where society and culture is taking us now. And unfortunately, the church, we have a lot of people in our faith communities, especially evangelicals, who have come out on the side of they were castigating Rittenhouse last year, and regrettably, they have not recanted. They have not come out and said, look, we said some things earlier on about Rittenhouse, about this trial, and we were a little bit, we came out a little bit fast because we thought we understood the case, but we regret that we said those things. They have not recanted their scurrilous statements about Rittenhouse. We need those famous people, and they know who they are, who are in our faith communities, who said these horrible things about Rittenhouse and being militia and being white supremacist and all of these things because they were kowtowing to culture and being a social justice, evangelical. They need to correct, their statements.
Kevin McGarry, co-founder and president of Every Black Life Matters. Thank you, Kevin, for sharing your perspective with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Gary.
Still ahead, country music star Leanne Rimes talks about the inspiration behind her new album. Country music singer Leanne Rimes is celebrating the release of her album God's Work, which she describes as inspirational. During an interview with Fox News, the 39-year-old says she chose the name for her new album as a reminder that we are called according to His purpose. Ultimately, Rimes is hopeful that God's work will bring people closer together during a time when the world is more divided than ever. She says the record is about music speaking to the times and the importance of each and every one of us creating a better world for one another. Rimes says it's a deeper album and she had fun creating it. She says it releases early next year. Good for her. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.